Hey everybody, welcome back. You're back at Ground Zero Salem. As always, I'm your host, Pat. It's been a little while. It's been a lull. They happen. I'm not Captain Consistency over here. I was for a little bit. Hopefully I'll get back on that. I was doing pretty well with the overarching kind of themes, covering different genres, stuff like that. But sometimes my listening tastes are like that. I'll obsess over a specific time period in music, like the whole emo violence, screamo kind of stuff, for lack of a better term, thing that I did, or I'll talk about a specific era in metal because I'm honing in and buying stuff up. But lately I've been kind of, my focus has been on other things. I'm still listening to a ton of music and collecting a ton of music, but I've been obsessing over video games, which is nothing new. I've always liked video games a lot, but I've been going in on, well, as you can see behind me, PS2 games and PS3. I've bought a bunch of consoles and stuff like that. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the games I've been playing in a minute. I've also been kind of getting back into wrestling a little bit, which is interesting. I mean, according to a lot of people, it's been a lot better the last couple of years. I've missed out on a lot of it. I stopped watching new stuff in the world of WWE anyway. Like, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago or something like that. If you follow wrestling, or follow WWE at least, you know that CM Punk came back from AEW and it was a whole thing. His return is pretty exciting, I think. He's doing a good job out there. He's got at least a couple good more years in him, which is kind of funny for me to say. We're exact same age. But yeah, so I've been following that stuff. I've been going back and watching all my old DVDs, all the old ECW stuff, and that's been really fun for me. Buying a couple new DVDs here and there of matches and just kind of rewatching a bunch of stuff. With a lot of that sports entertainment related content, a lot of what I like are the biographies and things like that, the whole stories of the territories and everything, how things used to be and how crazy that business was in decades past. But I've actually been paying more attention to matches and the skill exhibited by those athletes and what they do. So that's been fun for me. But anyway, before my meager YouTube skills started to atrophy, I thought it'd be a good idea to sit in front of the camera. I do have plenty of new stuff to talk about. All vinyl. I decided to make this an all vinyl update. With, if there was to be a very loose theme around it, there's a lot of gems in this that I decided that I needed to own on vinyl. I am definitely one of those people that loves having really, really important records for me, nostalgically speaking, sentimentally speaking, on vinyl. That's just my choice for the format. I like, all the stereotypical annoying boomer type things people say about vinyl, the warmth of the sound and holding it in your hands and the big artwork and all that. It just seems fitting for me to have the classics for me on vinyl. Plenty of new stuff, new to me stuff in here. I don't think there's any brand new releases. I think I'm going to be saving those for another time, but classic stuff in here, mostly metal, but some good hardcore selections. Oh, the reason that I thought I'd pick it out that way, by the way, is Ben Brainsmasher was on the Heavy Hole podcast with Big Will there. Great death metal podcast. If you haven't checked it out, it's pretty entertaining. Will's a really good podcast host. And Ben's got a similar thing where he likes to own stuff on vinyl that's like really important to him. I think he's way more stringent than I am. I acquire a lot of stuff on vinyl just to have it on vinyl, but a lot of this was me going, oh yeah, I only have that on CD. Oh, I have a beat up like Roadrunner Into the Vault 2-on-1 CD with no cover. I should own this on vinyl. It deserves that respect from me to have it. So I'll be talking about that in a minute. But since I am talking about video games and I have a stack in front of me, I thought it'd be fun to mention what I've been playing lately. I'm not a video game channel. I know that might not be the reason that you're here, but if you happen to enjoy this conversation, let me know. I do own a capture card. I bought one of those Elgato deals. I haven't hooked it up yet or figured out how to work it. So far, I'm way behind with my technology. I do have a nicer camera. I hope that's noticeable. But I only know of one setting to record on, and I know I can probably get this to look a lot better. So I'm way behind with teaching myself anything, expelling me out of one step over Luddite status, but it is what it is. Couple of games. Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. This is a PS3 game. Been playing a bunch of PS3 lately. This is from the minds of R.A. Salvatore, Todd McFarlane, and Ken Ralston. Not familiar with Ken Ralston, but R.A. Salvatore, the guy responsible for the Dark Elf trilogy and the Icewind Dale trilogy from the Forgotten Realms setting. Of course, Todd McFarlane, going way back to Spider-Man and Spawn and everything. So really cool game. I just made it just through the tutorial. I was playing this while I was spinning records, trying to cook up some fresh thoughts on some tunes. It's very Skyrim-ish, kind of like almost kind of hack and slash God of War action RPG kind of stuff. It's really good though. It seems to have an interesting plot so far. Very high fantasy, obviously. This, when I started looking for cool hidden gems for PS3 games, this seemed to pop up a bunch of times. This next one, Alice Madness Returns. This is like a dark, almost kind of steampunk take on Alice in Wonderland. Great, really, really cool, creative weapons. Like she's got a pepper grinder for like a gun. Really dark, weird, violent, disturbing, kind of twizzy. I could see somebody that playing this while wearing trap pants, drinking Mountain Dew. Nothing wrong with that. It's vaguely almost kind of like Dark Carnival-ish, but it is a really, really cool game. Great gameplay, great game mechanics so far, cool plot. There was an earlier Alice game set in the same universe, I want to say, that was for PC like 10 years before this, I believe. I also bought a PS5 Slim. Not buying that PS5 Pro thing. I got a couple of games for it. Mostly I bought it so I could play PS4 games. I want to get into Bloodborne. I beat Elden Ring and the DLC. I played all the way through it. I feel like, despite the fact that I'm really into video games now, way more than I have been in the recent past, I'm still kind of ruined for video games after playing through Elden Ring. I think it's still the most brilliant, fun video game ever. I want to play through all the other Souls games. It's tough. They're hard. Asterigos is a game I've heard, along with Lies of P, kind of like a Souls light kind of game. I haven't really gotten that far into it enough to judge that. I feel like stuff gets called Souls-like all the time when it doesn't necessarily warrant it. This is... It seems like it's going into a lot of Greco-Roman mythology on this. So far it's cool, but again, I just made it out of the tutorial, so... This is a nostalgic one for a lot of people, probably. It's new to me, Destroy All Humans 2. We have another Destroy All Humans game in the family room on our Xbox. It's this is not the original. This is the sequel. The newer one I have has a lot of like head-to-head kind of stuff. I play it with my son all the time. It's fun. This is more of a quest kind of game. It's almost like, I don't know, Grand Theft Auto with an alien, which is fun. It's cool. The voice of the guy that radios in and bosses you around is the guy who did the voice of Invader Zim. If you're into early 2000s cartoons that are kind of annoying, you might know Invader Zim. Not the biggest Invader Zim guy, but I did like the comic that the guy did before that, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. Anyway, this is cool. This is fun. It's funny. It's goofy. Running around, doing missions, that kind of stuff. Dragon Quest VIII. I played the first two Dragon Warriors several times. The old, grindy, turn-based ones. It's really cool playing this 3D version. It's very much the same kind of thing, going around talking to people, getting clues, going into dungeons, Again, I'm in the beginning of it, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful game. It's got cell shading, so it looks like, you know, a 3D cartoon. It's got all those classic monsters that the Dragon Warrior / Dragon Quest guy fights, the blue slimes and the healer jellyfish things and all that. Really great RPG. We'll see if I beat any of these. Like a lot of things I get into, I get super excited and I buy up a ton of crap. More so stuff that I could ever use in my lifetime, but that's just the way it is, you know? Could be worse things for me to get into. Anyway, one other thing before I get into the records, my good buddy John Bukowski, who I had a pretty good lengthy conversation with a while ago now, a year or two ago when I was doing the Ground Zero Salem Mondays. He's my friend from Syracuse that does a lot of stuff for that scene there. He's always involved in one project or another. Plays in a band called Ebony Sorrow, black metal band from Syracuse. Longest running black metal band from Syracuse, New York, too, by the way. He'd been doing a weekly radio show that was also a podcast called The Dangerous Meeting. That was excellent, where he'd have a different guest on every week, and they'd pick out a bunch of songs together to play. He's had a lot of pretty well-known people on there at this point. Musicians and the like. I think he had a guy, one of the newer members of Megadeth. He's had Carl from Earth Crisis, a bunch of people on there. Right now his project is a podcast called Paulie's Vault. It's a great concept brought on, sadly, by the loss of one of the elders of the scene back home in Syracuse. There's this guy, Paulie, who had been around. I think he started going to shows, I want to say like mid-'80s or something like that. He worked at a bunch of the local clubs around, humping gear and helping set stuff up. Sort of a sound guy, roadie kind of dude who was obsessive about music and recorded tons of stuff. Got soundboard recordings over all these really, really huge bands that went on to do a lot. Everything from literally like Stevie Ray Vaughan and the Stray Cats to Deicide. Tons of bands that played the Lost Horizon, which was the club that I cut my teeth, that I grew up at, going to shows at. Had incredible hardcore matinees during the 90s, and also tons of national acts that would play the night shows on Saturdays and Fridays. I saw everybody there from Typo Negative and Cannibal Corpse to Unbroken. I Mother Earth, like just big touring national acts came through this relatively small club. I want to say it's like probably like a 500 cap at the most or something like that. But a lot of these soundboard recordings sound excellent. And most recently, I think he's got Deicide from 1993 on the Legion tour. That sounds great. He's got Carcass on the Symphonies of Sickness tour up there. And again, there's tons of other stuff like Salt and Pepper at the New York State Fair from like a while back, you know. So a little bit of something for everybody. Check it out. It's really cool. Every single live set is introduced by somebody sharing memories of Paulie, which was really, really cool. And overall, just a great labor of love from a wonderful human being. So go check that out. I'll put a link in the description. Okay, let me get a sip of this cherry Pepsi here. It's literally all I wanted. Okay, so let's get into some death metal. This is a reissue. A band from the Netherlands that I always seem to think is from Finland. There's something very Finnish to me about Phlebotomized, but just the murkiness, the dense kind of fog of darkness around them feels very Finnish to me, but, you know, not too far off. We're talking, you know, a couple countries over. Phlebotomized, you know, if you like old school death metal, you've probably been introduced to them at some point. This is their demo from 1992, Devoted to God. Hammerheart Records pressed this to vinyl. Sounds awesome. Plays on 45. It's mastered super loud, very crushing. There's hints of like atmospheric keyboards. Nothing too dressed up, gussied up. You know, nothing, no riffs or anything. Just accents that add a real kind of gloomy vibe to it. Very brutal stuff. This is one of the aforementioned classics that I knew I needed to own on vinyl at some point. Effigy of the Forgotten by Suffocation came across my path, I think freshman year of high school. Got Frank Mullen in his Trump Plaza shirt there. I mean, you know, if you know death metal, you know how important this is. how Legion of Inveracity, the breakdown in it kicked off an entire genre, for better or for worse. All that kind of stuff. Got some splattery goodness there as far as the color goes. This came out on Listenable, reissued on Listenable Records. Just a pioneering brutal death metal record. It's funny because going back and listening to this, and also listening to Human Waste, and certain songs like Reincarnation, like the really early songs, I think Reincarnation's a reworked demo song. I might be wrong about that. They're very early songs, especially on the EP before this, are still kind of rooted in thrash a little bit. I know that they really pushed the envelope for creating brutal death metal, but like technical thrash, you know, like almost like Dark Angel or something, or Slayer or something like that, like done 5 times faster. But yeah, they were definitely completely changing the game with this. I can't believe how early this came out. I mean, it came out in 1991, and it was so ahead of its time. What a fantastic record. Definitely needed to own that. I'll never, ever perfect a system for having records on deck to pull from the pile and talk about. Right now, I have them kind of stacked on a chair, and it's still awkward. It's still awkward. There's no way I'm ever not going to be awkward in so many different ways. Atrocity, Hallucinations. This was one that I heard as a kid. I heard it when it came out, but I didn't own it. Bought it on CD maybe 10 years ago or something like that. Insane, blistering, technical German death metal that is so good. This is an original pressing on Nuclear Blast, SPV distribution, and according to, I think, Simon in Australia, Explosive Action, according to him, like a bunch of these just kind of popped up on the market recently, so I didn't pay too much for this, thankfully. And the center labels for you. But yeah, they're one of those bands that their sound changed very rapidly. By the second record, I know it sounds a lot different. I think it's a little bit more gothic and straightforward. It's still death metal, and then after that, they went completely in another direction, almost straight up gothic metal, I think. I don't know. I haven't really listened to that stuff. But this is a technical death metal masterpiece. It's great. Then, Morgoth. Cursed. Definitely had this back in the day and appreciate it way more now than I did then. I feel like I was influenced a lot by what I read in magazines at the time, and there was a lot of like, all these guys want to be death. Oh, this guy's trying to sound exactly like Chuck Schuldiner, which to an extent I can see. I mean, there are a lot of vocal similarities there. This is the first proper full length after 2 EPs that are both really good. I want to say there's a lot of death similarities, but they really build on it. There's a lot of variation, speed-wise, riff-wise, and everything. I love early death, obviously, like any death metal fan would. Weird that my favorite 2 death records are Scream Bloody Gore and Human. I feel like Leprosy I like a lot, but it's super basic. And if I'm going to reach for a death record that's kind of more raw, I'm going to reach for Scream Bloody Gore. As far as spiritual healing goes, I still like it. I mean, the leads on it are really good. It's James Murphy. He's a fantastic guitarist. But there's something about that record that I wouldn't say falls flat, but just I never want to listen to it if I'm pulling out like a classic death record. Human, it's the beginning of them starting to get proggy and kind of technical, but it's just so well written and catchy, and I really like the production on it too. I feel like this is like almost like if Leprosy had a little bit more tricks up its sleeve or something like that. There's even like, I wouldn't say doomy, but like a good like slower song on the second side that's kind of like desperate and really evil sounding. Yeah, I don't know. Morgoth, Cursed. It's a banger. Another German band, by the way. Early 90s, death metal, Century Media. I even like feel sorry for the Fanatic. Not a death metal record, but really good like Killing Joke worship record. Then we got this Entombed, self-titled. This is just me being collector scum, wanting to own this on vinyl. I think I've got it on another format or two. No, I got rid of my tape, I think. I think I still have it on CD. I should sell that. And I also have all the separate EPs on vinyl because I just love the stuff on this so much. I want to say my favorite thing that Entombed has ever recorded is probably the Crawl EP. It just the sound of it is so good, and I love the vocalist on that, the guy from Nirvana 2002 rather. This collects those two, the split with the new Bomb Turks, which is a really interesting choice for a band to do a split with for Entombed, and in the Out of Hand 12-inch single, 12-inch EP or whatever. So there's a ton of covers on this. You got Night of the Vampire by Rocky Erickson. First time I'd ever heard Rocky Erickson in any form, which was a good introduction. They do a good version of that. State of Emergency by Stiff Little Fingers. One of the best 77 punk bands for sure. God of Thunder, Kiss cover. Not the biggest Kiss guy, but that's a great song. Also Death covered that. And Black Breath by Repulsion. Good span of Entombed from their beginnings or right past Left Hand Path up until the beginning of their Death and Roll era. So overall, great compilation. Then this was a repurchase for me. I had this back in the day. My roommate introduced me to this band. They're Swedish, I believe. Scumbrigade, Negative Hardcore Destructive Youth. I love the simple, it's the girl from Night of the Living Dead, just clearly just screen printed on a blank jacket, super DIY presentation. Really robust sound, very heavy, I wouldn't say pure D-beat, but a lot of kind of D-beat rhythms going on with it, kind of metallic Crust stuff. Before a lot of that started blowing up, this is at least a couple of years before Tragedy came out. I think Wolfpack, before they were Wolf Brigade, were starting around this time. Skid System. It's kind of in the same pocket as a lot of that stuff. Very metal. It doesn't get too stadium epic, but it's got a bit more meat on the bone than just straightforward, stripped down D-beat kind of stuff. Metallic kind of Crust stuff. Cool. I think if you can track it down, I think there's still copies up on Discogs. I got this for pretty cheap. I don't think really people talk about them that much, but they're great. Then I was super excited to find this. I came across targeted advertising on Facebook via the death of me, but there was some kind of like used vinyl for cheap, and it was like typical, like Tom Petty, Down the Torpedoes for $12.99. It had some pretty good like regular general interest like rock titles, but I was like, is there any metal or any punk? And they had, and I've actually had my eye out for this for a while. This is Civil Disobedience, Invention Extinction. This was a band on Profane Existence back in the 90s. They were from, I want to say Minneapolis. I could be wrong about that. But they were one of those crust bands that was very prevalent at the time on Profane Existence. They had an interesting approach. Pretty talented guys, not playing just straightforward, fast Crust stuff, really. They had a lot of kind of weird, kind of cycling, almost like circusy, weird riffs and like the occasional ska part. And it's not bad. When you can actually pull off the occasional ska part, you know what you're doing. You're actually good at your instruments. But yeah, kind of hoarse shouted, almost kind of growly sort of vocals. The 7-inch is incredible. The 7-inch is an all-time banger, especially from that label at the time on Profane Existence in the 90s. I remember being kind of disappointed by this, like kind of hoping that it would be like a little bit more fast and intense like the 7-inch was. But going back and listening to it now, it's great. It's super good. Great gatefold there too, really nice. And I think this is the beginning of like the ironic black metal thing, like poking fun at black metal or whatever. This great iconic Anarchy skull there, where they're talking about people in the bands. Yeah, you can see right there. Shagreth on Sticks, black metal or whatever. This great iconic Anarchy skull there, where they're talking about people in the bands. Yeah, you can see right there. Shagreth on Sticks. Our drummer's not actually a black metal guy. But anyways, regardless, that was the 90s for you. Good stuff. Great band. For the stuff that's not too obvious, I'll put links. You guys don't need a link to Effigy of the Forgotten. You know what Effigy of the Forgotten is. But maybe some of the more obscure stuff, I'll put links in case you're curious. For that one, certainly. Motörhead, 1916. I can't believe it's taken me this long to own this classic of my childhood on vinyl. I've had it on cassette and CD a lot of times. A lot of times, folks. This got reissued on Century Media /Epic. Surprisingly, this wasn't too expensive on Century Media, thankfully. This was my intro to Motörhead. I was I think 13 years old when this came out. Blew my mind. I think I'd been a little bit familiar about who they were just from reading Metal Maniacs and Thrasher and other bands' t-shirts as you did at the time, but the song that there was a music video for was I'm So Bad, Baby, I Don't Care, the second track on here. The first lines out of Lemmy's mouth are, I make love to mountain lions. And I was like, okay, tell me more, Mr. Bestiality Man. But, I mean, this is great. You know, it was followed by March or Die, I think, which, you know, that's probably their worst record. And even then, that record's got some bangers on it, but No Voices in the Sky is a good example of, like, one of their more punkish tunes. Nightmare the Dream Time's, like, almost like a dark, like, I wouldn't say goth, but, like, really foreboding, like, you know, kind of dark song. Songs like Angel City and Going to Brazil took a long time to grow on me because it's clearly a byproduct of Lemmy living in LA for a while and, you know, hanging out at the Whiskey and listening to Poison and stuff, but at the end of the day, I still like the songs. They grew on me after a while. Ramones, Love Letter to the Ramones, sounds like the Ramones, awesome. Shut You Down, great song. 1916, sad ballad about World War I with, like, organs and stuff, and it's heartbreaking. Love this record. Very sentimental, important record to me. Not my favorite Motörhead record of all time. That's probably, it's hard to pick, but probably Rock and Roll. I love that era, though. I mean, I love the classic 3-piece stuff. You know, that stuff is very important to me, but the 4-piece stuff, Rock and Roll and Orgasmatron, so good. What a great run, the 3-album run. All right, so Wipers, Youth of America. Mention of Rocky Erickson a little bit earlier reminded me of a time in the punk scene in, like, the early to mid 2000s where people were discovering all of a sudden, and I don't know what it could be attributed to. I think Chaos and Teos, the festival that used to happen in Austin, might have had something to do with it. I know there was, like, some documentaries and stuff that came out. People got really into the Wipers, Rocky Erickson, Dead Moon, and Leatherface. And I don't know if it was just, I think certain bands were name-checking all the aforementioned as influences, like Born Dead Icons and Tragedy and stuff. Tragedy might be named after the Wipers song, I'm not sure. A lot of people were just going to this kind of melancholic, gruff-vocaled. Rocky Erickson's kind of his own thing, obviously, going back to the 60s and whatnot, but he had sort of a weird, like, occult, rock and roll, evil, obviously being influenced by mental illness sort of thing. But I just remember that period where all those bands just got huge, seemingly out of nowhere, but I want to say it's probably because of newer bands name-checking them and documentaries being about Rocky Erickson and Dead Moon. But I'm just reminded of this time where everybody was into this sort of, like, melancholic, kind of gruff-vocaled stuff. And I really like the Wipers. I like Is This Real? That's the other one I own by them. I also own a box set, which I think has everything. Is This Real is the other one I own on vinyl. This, I wish it had more songs. It's only 7 songs. Second LP. But, you know, if you haven't heard the Wipers, describing them would be kind of difficult. Not overdriven, not super distorted, not really, really fast. They weren't really a hardcore band. They were punk. Big influence on Nirvana. But punk, kind of like a little bit surfy, a little bit gloomy. They were cool. They were really cool. They were from the Pacific Northwest, and they sounded like it. I feel like that was an era when there were bands like Poison Idea and the Wipers and stuff like that was highly indicative of where it came from sound-wise. Another good example of that is Greek black metal, which there's been a few things where I'm like, yeah, I need to own that, need to pick that up. That is affordable. I'm going to buy it. Got repressed. Rotting Christ, Thy Mighty Contract. I mean, if you know your Greek black metal, you know this is pretty much a mandatory record. Steeped in atmosphere, steeped in melancholy, beautiful, beautiful melodic elements and passages. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Not too much else to say about it than that. This is probably their best, in my opinion. Super important. I'm not as familiar with Septic Flesh, but this is a reissue that came out on the Crypt and Season of Mist, which is interesting. Seeing the Crypt working with Season of Mist or doing a collaborative thing. This is the second Septic Flesh, which is a Greek name, Greek title. I looked up what the direct translation of the letters was. It was like asantan or something like that. Translated, it means mirror, though. It says right here on the back, what you are holding may seem as an album, but is actually a strange mirror. The words you are reading are actually thoughts from within a dream. Never forget the scepter was always in your hand. There's a certain level of melodrama in theater. I think especially like around the Mediterranean, not just with Greece, but Italy as well. With a lot of the black metal, there's a certain like level of pomp and grandiosity that's very genuine, though, and it's very cool. This band, I want to say, compared to the others like Verathron, the aforementioned Rotting Christ, Necromantia, they have a little bit more of a stronger death metal element in a lot of ways and a stronger gothic metal element. Can you call it Greek black metal? Yeah, sure. You know, I think Greek black metal overall is a little bit more death metal-y than black metal from other parts of the world, especially the second wave Norwegian stuff and all that. Vocals tend to be a little bit more guttural and things like that. The guitars are beefier in some cases. But this has a lot of, I don't know, maybe they've been listening to 4AD stuff a lot and there's a lot of vocal choral kind of things going on with it and strong instrumentations outside of the usual guitar, bass, drums, cool keyboards and stuff like that. Lots of strong emotional elements to it that are great. Brutal Truth, Need to Control. Again, got a bunch of stuff from Earache. They had a bit of a sale, so a lot of these Earache reissues, they're going to keep cashing in and reissuing the stuff and reissuing it. I think this is that FDR remasters stuff. I mean, it sounds good. Does it sound any different? I'm not sure, especially because Extreme Conditions Demand Extreme Responses is one of my favorite grindcore records of all time. I know it like the back of my hand. Can hum all the riffs and everything. I really hadn't listened to that much Brutal Truth outside of that up until maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I go on these little tangents and buying sprees and listening sprees, and I go through a grindcore one, I feel like, at least 2 times a year. I like grind a lot. And around about 2 or 3 years ago, I was like, man, I need to step up and check out some other Brutal Truth stuff other than the first album. Early on, they kind of strayed away from the kind of death metal-y grind that they were doing and got weird and got noisy, kind of discordant. You could see how they went on to do stuff on Relapse and kind of collaborating with and playing shows more with some of the bands that were pushing the envelope of quote-unquote extreme music at the time, like early Dillinger Escape Plan and stuff like that. It got a lot more experimental and weird, and this is a good leap forward. This was, still on Earache. They hadn't signed to Relapse yet, but the vocals are still very much like kind of pushing the envelope as far as being guttural and death metal-ish. I want to say they get a little bit more shouty later on the subsequent albums, but this is certainly not nearly as straightforward as Extreme Conditions at all. And for that reason, I'm not as into it, but it's still really, really awesome. Then we've got Massacre from Beyond. I mean, iconic Ed Repka art. Some people have kind of lampooned it, calling them evil sea monkeys, these alien things swirling into an abyss. One of those bands that had different periods where they weren't around. Obviously, they were like a pioneering death metal band in the mid to late 80s, did a bunch of classic demos, which I've been revisiting lately, are awesome. Because the more and more time goes on, the more and more like 80s death metal, rare, obscure 80s death metal stuff I'm trying to track down. This was another one that I never had back in the day. I think I'd heard it. I liked it. I've had friends who, say that this one's kind of overrated. I think it's really good. It might be hitting me the wrong time in my life, where it's like, I don't know if it's going to ever land in my lap the way it would have when it came out. I will say the Cam Lee Wipeout death metal vocals, like, there's people that sort of emulate him, most famously Barney Greenway. Dave Ingram from Benediction's another one who's obviously very influenced with the big roaring vocals. I'd say even Carl Willits from Bolt Thrower to a certain extent. I think Cam Lee kind of created a school of death metal vocal by doing this kind of like commanding, very enunciated style. But the riffs are great. I kind of wish that when they were around that first run before they got absorbed into death and all that, several of the members had anyway, that there was an album from then. I'd be very curious to hear it. This is kind of like a reformation, doing the best with what they had at the time. It's a bit polished and everything, which is good. I'm glad the quality of it's good, but I'd like to hear a rawer. Now I'm sounding like Andrew Tate. Fuck that guy. I'd like to hear a rawer version of like album Massacre. Which honestly, that's obviously not going to happen unless somebody buys a time machine. Then we've got the aptly named Obscurity. This is not the Swedish Obscurity, probably the most well-known one. This is the Buffalo area band. It's from like this small town between Buffalo and Niagara Falls, some weird island. I don't know if it's like a suburb or what. Anyway, just did a handful of demos. They were around in the same scene and around the same time as Eternal Torment and Baphomet. Of course, Cannibal Corpse, all that kind of stuff. Great classic early Western New York. That whole area of like Western New York into Ontario area, that whole scene was so brutal and so ahead of its time, with crushing kind of climbing riffs and just all the really nasty sort of visceral death metal stuff. And a lot of this has been given a lot of love and reissued on labels like Extremely Rotten. CD stuff I think was reissued on CDN. They have a split discography with Eternal Torment that's definitely worth looking into, but great early raw brutal death metal stuff. Another kind of cool example of 90s brutal death is Descend, Demonstration 1995, also reissued on Extremely Rotten. Cool embossed cover there. This band was from Ohio, I want to say, and I feel like the first half of the demo kind of falls in the line with like a lot of that early kind of brutal death metal stuff. Nothing had gotten so exaggerated to the point of being ridiculous. There's not any typewriter drums or anything like that, or pig squeals or anything, but just the crushing groovy riffs, and then they get weirder and weirder, I feel, as the demo goes on. It's a short listen, obviously. It's only 5 songs, but a couple of the songs on here get really weird and kind of Sabbathy and just kind of odd. There's not too much that really sounds like this. It's great. Another killer demo pressed on 12-inch, 5 songs, Assassin Saga of Nemesis. This is Teutonic stuff from the mid-'80s. Great German thrash. A couple of really good albums. The Interstellar Experience, which is the less popular one, that's kind of almost sort of goofy crossover. And The Upcoming Terror, which is, I couldn't remember the name of it to save my life. Upcoming Terror is considered a classic if you're kind of a deep head, I feel like, for a lot of the German thrash stuff from the 80s. It's got a lot of those elements, the kind of raspy vocals and whatnot that a lot of people like Teutonic thrash for over US stuff that's a little bit more clean. This, I feel like, could easily sit next to some proto-black stuff like really early Sodom or really early Destruction. It's got a really feral, almost kind of shrieking vocal element to it that if you like the quote-unquote first wave black metal stuff that's kind of coming out of thrash and you haven't heard this, you should give it a shot for that reason. Then you've got the Absolut Svaveldioxid split, 2 Mongo on a D-beat sort of bands. Absolut is from Ontario and Svaveldioxid is from Sweden. You'll notice Svaveldioxid here is hanging out by the Entombed Cross. That's cool. Absolut is really good. I feel like with every subsequent release, they get better and better. I talked about them recently. Their new tape is really, really excellent. This is great too. It's a little bit more dialed back with the vocal approach. I feel like the vocalist has only gotten more manic as time has passed. This has got sort of an echoey, reverbed out vocal attack, like their more recent stuff. It's just not quite as gruff. The new stuff's like almost death metal kind of vocal style, almost. Just blazing, D-beat rhythms, great kind of face-melting guitar stuff. Svaveldioxid is good. I'm not into them quite as much. It's decent kind of Mongol kind punk or whatever you want to call it. Very Swedish, No Security and more recent kind of stuff too. I'm trying to think of more recent examples. Maybe like Wolf Brigade and stuff like that, but not as metallic or anything. A little bit more like raw, stripped down, straightforward Swedish hardcore stuff. Still good though. Depravity, Silence of the Centuries. This band is Finnish. Always love the cover art for this. I have a reissue kicking around on CD that they did this with a couple of these Finnish ones. They kind of like reimagined it. Dude, I realized that the original artwork isn't like conventionally the best, but it has a character unto itself. Like, it's almost like putting a weird filter on it, or like giving all these guys like weird like Laura Loomer plastic surgery or something. Why do we do the polar plunge? Oh, come on, man. It's for a good cause. I hate this. Anyways, Silence of the Centuries, compilation of a couple of EPs by this Finnish band. It's great. Again, steeped in atmosphere. It's super brutal, very guttural, heavy, kind of mid-paced in a lot of parts. It's got a lot of like 1-2-1-2, sort of, you know, almost polka kind of thrash rhythms. It's not super blast laden or anything. There's a little bit of atmospheric keyboards going on with it. Nothing too overwhelming or anything. Just kind of tastefully put in the background. Really nice. Really, really good reissue. Also by the Crypt, I believe. Yeah, Dark Descent and the Crypt. Total Support with a V instead of a U. Bad Religion. Just to mix things up a little bit. 924 Gilman Street. October 21st, 1989. It's an FM broadcast, so it sounds really good. I'm not sure exactly what the total timeline was with this band, but they were an early 80s LA hardcore punk band, very well known. You've probably heard of them. How Can Hell Be Any Worse is a great classic California hardcore punk record. Then they did a total U-turn and did, like, I guess a really bad sort of prog record. I should really listen to just to check it out. Into the Unknown, I think it's called. They did that. It failed. Like, nobody liked it, apparently. And then they were gone for a little bit. And then they came back with an album called Suffer, which those are the two albums I really like by Bad Religion. How Can Hell Be Any Worse and Suffer. After that, and there's nothing wrong with this, but after that, they largely just kind of recreated the sound they started on Suffer and did it over and over again with some tweaks, you know, getting a little bit slower as time went on, a little bit more and more produced. Greg Gaffin, the singer, Greg, the singer, started Epitaph Records. Which was a record label known for a specific kind of sound, all this sort of Californian, really well produced, melodic punk stuff. Came its own kind of scene. No Effects came out of that. That guy started a record label that had a very strong sound as well. Just kind of went on and on. The beginnings of that stuff is something I've kind of been re-obsessed over a little bit. I am extremely picky. I love the first two Bad Religion albums. I revisited No Effects recently as well. A lot of that stuff holds up for me up to a certain point. Obviously, like the kind of the silliness gets kind of grating with that band, but man, very accomplished musicians, can play their asses off. They're on their last tour, going around the country right now. No Effects is, but the stuff compiled on this is from 1989. Suffer came out in 88. I want to say How Can Hell Be Any Worse came out in 84. It's only songs from those two, played live, played super fast and tight and raw, but everything's clear in the mix. Funny stage banter. It's recorded at Gilman Street in Berkeley, California, which is a renowned DIY venue. I've only been to one show there. I saw Spaz there a long time ago, and that was incredible. Like, just a historic venue. So lots of, you know, kind of important stuff going on with this record, but excellent recording. I feel like this era of Bad Religion is just like untouchable if you like this specific kind of hardcore. I heard a live recording from Germany from the same year that is also just stellar. A little bit more punk here. This is a very nice reissue of Blackout Vacant by Poison Idea. See the spot gloss there. This is a deluxe 2LP reissue of... to be honest, I'm not sure exactly where in the timeline of Poison Idea full lengths this is. I want to say it came after Feel the Darkness. But they have a lot of records. They put out a lot of stuff during their career. This is cool. From Feel the Darkness onward, well, starting with War All the Time even, especially from Feel the Darkness onward, they got a lot more kind of like rock and roll, a lot more kind of solo stuff involved. Weirdly, they didn't turn into a crossover band. They kept their sound. Jerry A's vocals never changed. These are really powerful, roaring, kind of gruff punk vocals. But they would occasionally have like piano on songs and stuff like that. They maintained the core of their sound being this really gnarly hardcore punk stuff and just kind of involved more rock and roll. But like the rock and roll they threw in was way more like sort of Motörhead in spirit, maybe calling from the roots of like proto-punk stuff like the Stooges too. They were big record collectors and wore their influences on their sleeves. They did a lot of covers and stuff like that, and you can kind of see what they were into by their covers. They covered I Got It Right by the Stooges and lots of stuff like that. The bonus LP here has B-sides, covers, and tributes. So you've got Open Your Eyes, Flamethrower Love. Yeah, we got some Stiff Baiters stuff going on there. Green Onions they do. Yeah, you know, they mix it up. They're kind of like one of those bands like Anti-Scene where they could have just been like a straight-up cover band and been awesome at it, as well as, you know, writing really, really great punk tunes. And then there's like a live on the radio, 4 songs on that. So I just want to get these TKO reissues are really, really nice. They're good quality, you know, big thick vinyl, big nice gatefolds and all that stuff. So that was definitely a must-have for me. From the Earache stuff, one of my favorite records of this ilk, any of the kind of heavily influenced by Sabbath, stoner doom kind of stuff, Sleep's Holy Mountain. Love this record. Took a little while to grow on me as a kid. For whatever reason, I really loved St. Vitus and Trouble and stuff, but this was like one step further into the fuzziness of it all. And I think it was like maybe a little bit too Blue Cheer for me at the time or something. A little too hippie-ish or something. I don't know. But now, one of my favorite records of this style. Never really got into Dope Smoker so much, which is kind of odd. You'd think I would, but this is a picture disc, which is cool. It's nice. Sounds okay. Sounds decent. I noticed a little bit of surface noise, which is, it is what it is. It's a picture disc. Not really taking away anything from the sound. It's just like in between songs I could hear it a little bit. But yeah, crushing, lumbering, Master of Reality kind of inspired riffs. You know, super heavy, thick stoner metal. Classic of the genre. Then one band that I keep exploring further and further into every couple of years, one of my favorite records from the 70s, it's like a proto-metal hard rock record, is Entranced by the Scorpions, and just a fantastic album. But there are other stuff I needed to get into, I felt. So I picked up this one, Scorpions Fly to the Rainbow. They're coming out of their first album. I believe this is album number 2 for them. I'll correct that if that's not the case. But Lonesome Crow was their first album before this, which is super dreamy and psychedelic. It still has the elements with the vocal style. You could hear where they were going with eventually becoming like something bridging the gap between hard rock and metal. But it's almost like a krautrock record, their first one, Lonesome Crow. And this still, I feel like, has some of the proggier kind of psychedelic elements in there too. There's some really long songs on here. The title track clocks in at like 9, almost 10 minutes. Really cool though. So I'm just starting to get into a lot of this Scorpion stuff from that era. The 70s stuff is markedly kind of different from the 80s stuff, which is common for a lot of rock bands from the 70s. It's very big, you know, look at Rainbow. 2 more. So I'm in the process of cleaning out my collection from some stuff I don't really want or need anymore. I sold a bunch of stuff to Sorry State last week, and what I like to do is bring in a ton of records to them and then seeing what they've got expensive, where I normally might not shell out that much money out of my pocket. Big sentimental record for me, and this wasn't cheap, but it's totally worth it, is Dixie by Avail. Avail were hardcore punk, I guess. Yeah, like a punk band from Richmond, Virginia, that was around in the 90s. I think they played some reunion stuff recently, not 100% on whether they're active or not. I know they played the Fest in Gainesville not that long ago. I, for whatever reason, could never really get into their other records at all. Saw them live once, they were excellent. This, for whatever reason, just does it for me. It's super tuneful, uplifting, like positive, kind of hardcore punk stuff, but it's not cheesy. There's no like empty platitudes about unity or anything like that. It's all, you know, kind of personal stuff, sort of soulful. I feel like as far as like general sound, you could hear sonic similarities to like maybe Bouncing Souls, maybe certain elements of Fugazi. I don't know who else, maybe H2O, but there's almost just like a very like humble, like kind of folksy kind of thing to it. It feels sort of southern, you know, they're from Richmond, so it's just, you know, beneath the Mason-Dixon line, but they've got their own vibe. And on this record, I should give the other ones a shot. They've got like a total of like 4 or 5 albums. I feel like there's Satiate, and the first one's Satiate, and then Among the James, or just Across the James, I don't know. They have a bunch of records. This is the main one by them that I listen to. I listen to it Into the Ground. They do a great cover of Pink Houses by John Cougar Mellencamp on it. Just awesome. It's short, sweet, to the point. You know, it's like half an hour, 35 minutes maybe long, but super anthemic and just makes me happy to listen to it. Something that's also anthemic and melodic and punk, but a little bit more manic and weird and crazy, is The Many Moods of the Vindictives by the Vindictives. This is a compilation of, I think, everything. I think it might be a complete discography of this Chicago band. It belongs in the ranks of quote-unquote leather jacket pop punk. I've heard the term used before. I think my buddy Jason, I don't know if he coined the term, but he repeated it to me, and it makes so much sense. It's, you know, not the modern stuff, not the stuff that Finn McKenty talks about that has like breakdowns. Definitely not the stuff that kind of came out of Blink-182 or whatever. The beginnings of it that kind of aped a lot of Ramones riffs. The people behind it seem to have a lot of like mental health issues for whatever reason. I'm thinking stuff like Screeching Weasel, The Queers, Sloppy Seconds, and the Vindictives. It's a very small group of bands, and I think most of them centered around Chicago and the Midwest. Sloppy Second was from Indianapolis. Queers were from New Hampshire, but they all kind of had a strong Ramones influence and a lot of like weird like mid-century pop culture references and a lot of songs about depression and mental health struggles and stuff like that. This is great. This is the most like manic and obnoxious out of all the aforementioned and the fastest. Not for everybody. I think with a lot of punk, you're going to come across people that have sort of a snotty vocal approach, whether it's Jello Biafra or any of the singers from the bands I just talked about, or the Feeders, you know, and it's certainly in that realm. It's kind of nasally but melodic. There's backing vocals that sync up really well and like multi-part harmonies, but none of it is like super bubblegum like a lot of the Fat Records bands are. This is more like in your face and just wacky. I think wacky's definitely a good word to describe it. This is a double LP. There's nothing fancy in here. I'm pretty sure it's black vinyl too. Yeah, just like really simple center labels. Nothing in that. There's not a big booklet, but they give you a CD booklet in it. Just trying to cut costs, I guess, probably. But yeah, this came out, I want to say late 90s. It's been out of print forever. You know, it wasn't cheap, but I was happy to get it. I have it on cassette as well. And that's the thing about having evergreen, like classic records to you on cassette. You never know. You never know what's going to happen. Like if there's going to be a snag or something's going to get eaten. It's just, and even without that, there's just wear and tear over the years. So this came out on Lookout Records stuff, which was the label that released a lot of that 90s pop punk. They were Green Day's original label too, if you didn't know. Lookout stuff is getting pretty pricey. So I was happy to get something at a reasonable price of this. I looked at it online. It was way more than, not way more, but a fair amount more than what I paid for it in the shop. So actually I didn't pay anything because I flipped records. So that's it. Okay. Punk, death metal, you know, usual stuff. I think, who knows? I always do this at the end of my videos where I'm like, I think I might talk about this next time. Like, no, I won't. But I kind of have more records that I want to talk about that I bought in the recent months. You know, stuff that I've been just kind of been spinning while playing video games, and I've got more classics that I acquired on vinyl that I can talk about. So I think I'm just going to continue along this path, but that's subject to change at any time. You know how I am. All right, well, it's been fun. I hope all you folks are doing well. Feel free to comment, like, subscribe. You know the deal, the YouTube thing. My God, this is over an hour. Jeez, crow, I'm going to need to edit this. All right. Love you. Bye.